With funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, New Unity has transformed its Newington Green Meeting House into a fully accessible, free heritage space, showing its radical history and encouraging visitors to think differently. The building, which was a hotbed of revolutionary thinking in the 18th century, holds stories of Richard Price, Anna Letitia Barbauld, Andrew Pritchard, and most notably Mary Wollstonecraft, leading to it being described as the birthplace of British feminism. The Meeting House hosts a regular programme of events and exhibitions celebrating this history and serving its local community. Find out more online.
Hello. So obviously today is starting differently. Usually, thankfully, with Newington Green having the support, we've been able to have a really good... Can you hear me? Okay. We've been able to have a really lovely space to have more of the community to join us, but obviously with the pandemic and it being Halloween and our good friend and Auntie Rona, things are different now. However, thankfully, we're able to film all of this, so it will be streamed online. And really and truly, that's what's going to be happening from here onwards with our events, so that we can still continue keeping Black Exchange. We also want to thank Newington Green for giving us this space from the get-go. As much as, obviously, when it comes to Black History Month, it seems that's when the arts industry or even spaces then want to make space and allow people to hold events. It seems as if Black History Month is always the one month of the year where Black artists are able to be seen or be more present. But I think what's great with Newington Green is that their ethos supports Black exchanges, which is about enabling everyone to be able to have a voice. So we want to thank Newington for that. We also want to touch base on the reasons as to why we created Black Exchange. We always go back to that Carla, because we were reading the book together. When were we reading it again?
It was like last year.
Yeah. Natives, the book, and when we were reading it, we kept having these deep conversations and realizing that we can't be the only people talking about having to unlearn and relearn your own history. I think, obviously, there's a lot out there in regards to you can do a DNA test and figure out where you come from and your parents and the stories that you get told by your elders, but having to relearn so much because of the lack of truth and education that's out there in regards to history. It's unfortunate, but when you're living in the Western world, especially some places in Europe, or should I say all of Europe, you're limited as to what history you're taught. It's always that concept of whoever, when it comes to history, the winner is the one who retells the story, and the story that we're taught. It didn't just start off or end with Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and even the stories that we're told then. Rosa Parks was an old woman who was tired and sat down on the bus, which is not the truth, because it came from, she was always doing civil rights prior to that. So I think the book of Carla definitely started us both off, wanting to explore our history and relearn things, but not try to use Black Exchange as a tool to carry on this false pretense of being teachers, because we're not. We're literally both artists who are learning as we're going, but creating a space where everyone can have that conversation.
Yeah, Black Exchange is all about creating community, and I think like we're all on this journey of relearning our history and unlearning essentially all of the lies we've been taught. So normally when we started out, we had our first event like prior to lockdown, and we had a crowd of 80 people, and we were able to have a beautiful conversation on the topic of colorism, which is an intense topic, and it affects a lot of people. But I think with Black Exchange, we're not shying away from these conversations. They're conversations that are critical to have, and with Black Exchange, it's about how can we have these conversations and how can we move forward beyond them. And so with the series of events we've run with Newington Green over Black History Month, we've decided to focus on the topic of the arts, because that is the industry we're in, and also to make it a celebratory event of what we're achieving and what other artists and creators that we admire are achieving. Because for us, with Black Exchange, if we have a space, it's about who can we bring into this space and showcase and celebrate them as well as ourselves.
I think it was important also to make sure that we recognize that, thankfully, because we have been working on our own arts and our own sort of journey ourselves independently, if we're then given opportunities rather than being selfish with it, enabling that to then become a platform for other voices, because I think the issues are that with the arts industry, it's almost as if only one black artist can make it at a time. There's only one major film director who everybody knows about. There's one editor who everyone knows about. There doesn't seem to be, or should I say the arts industry doesn't seem to want to make spaces for multiple. And I think if we're being given opportunities, we want to be able to make a platform that can be open for everyone and create a space and bring a community with you rather than making that space for yourself and then taking it and for yourself, basically. I think what's been great with Stour Space, when we had the space originally in Hackney Wick, that's a community space, but not many people knew that it was a free space that was able to be used by anyone. But simply because of everything seeming so somewhat intimidating to be able to go in and approach, to ask questions, because when you go into the space itself, if in all honesty, prior to us having our event, you didn't see people who looked like you who were there. It was predominantly European established artists who were already going, and so it was only known amongst a small audience. But once we were given the space, then it created opportunities for other people of colour, though we hate that terminology because you can't put everybody in one category. It then became a space that when there were audiences who were asking how we got it, we were able to connect them. And I think that's what it's about. If you've managed to get an opportunity, don't be selfish with it. And hopefully with Black Exchanges, thankfully we've been able to be given funding and support to be able to make a platform there we can actually put it towards different artists. So it doesn't have to be people who are from my field where I'm painting and fashion design, but we can actually include dancers or actors and start to bring more of a voice for everyone. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think because currently within the arts industry, there's very much an elitism and nepotism of who you know rather than your actual creative ability. And at times it can be a very frustrating industry to be in. And I think we're both very much in the positions of, rather than trying to wait for opportunities, we're making our own spaces and our own opportunities. Or if we are given opportunities, we're making do with menial budgets that are actually allocated to black artists to make work. And, you know, being given lemons and still fucking managing to make lemonade. Excuse me.
It's true, but that's what's always been taught. I think that's the thing. It's about not waiting for things to necessarily be given to you, but trying to use what you have to make the end result yourself. I think if you constantly wait for something to happen, you may be waiting forever, especially in the industry that we're in regards to the arts. It's so predominantly not people who look like us that the opportunities they're too scarce, there's not enough. So for that, if you can manage to, even if you have to work 5 countless jobs that are not fulfilling in any way, shape, or form, you do that to produce the funds to create the work. And then once you've managed to put something out, you then manage to create a more of an audience not even that, you manage to make the project that would enable you to gain an audience for you to then move forward. I think that constant idea of being frustrated, especially with this time that we're in with social media, everyone's constantly putting things out there, so you're constantly comparing yourself or trying to keep up, but the facts are, if you have the base and the foundations to actually create something great, then if you put that into a final project, you will be able to get something back from it.
Yeah, I think because we very much talk about relearning our history, but I think we have to be very conscious that we are living and breathing history. So any work we are making or we are documenting our communities and our lives, this is history, and I think it's about what we can do to create that for the next generation of what we did not have when we were growing up.
But I think overall, the foundations of Black Exchange is more about community, as much as some people may assume that because you are, even this terminology established, they can assume that we are, but quite factually, we're all still trying to navigate and create our own platforms and initiate a project that can create a community and bring everyone together, and hopefully, thankfully, what we've been able to do with funding, we've been actually able to put our words into action, because I think we have this complex of people always talking about what they want to do and waiting for somebody to jump on it, to believe in it. But if you don't believe in your project yourself, nobody else is actually going to believe in it either way. So with that, we want to bring on board, because we did start a little bit late.
We've got
our first performance. Yeah.
We've got Vivian Chris, who will be doing a dance performance. We'll just clear the stage.
In 2020, if I see like social media, being black is like, you know, having swag, looking good, having girls ratchet, like that's some cliche, you know. And me as a dancer, you know, the name is Black Exchange, so what can I give it to you? What can you give it to me? I don't even know. I would just, you know, try to share my own story, bring you somewhere, and like, you're just gonna decide at the end of the day, you decide what it's like. So, me, I'm kind of young, you know, so I'm like, yo, I'm not really happy with everything, the trend, the hip hop, but I will show you right now why it's to be, why many people perceive to be black for our generation. DJ, drop the drum. What was that? That was like hip hop. You know when you turn up in your club? That's kind of cool. But now in 2020, being black is also more than that. I'd say that in a way, people right now, you know, with Black Lives Matter and everything, they see shit like differently. I mean, right now we kind of like aware being black is an history. We come from somewhere. We value. We're human beings. We're beautiful and we're magic. So the only thing I would say like is good right now is like we got faith, we got hope. We got hope because right now everybody's kind of aware of what's going on, so we're all thinking about this. Right now I think every single like human being wants some change. Everybody wants some change. You know? Changes. Changes. Yeah.
I see no changes. Wake up in the morning and ask myself, it's like first living, should I blast myself? I'm tired of being poor and even worse, I'm black. My stomach hurts, so I'm looking for a purse to snatch. Cops give a damn about a Negro. Pull a trigger, kill a nigga, he's a hero. Get it back to the kids who the hell cares. One less hungry mouth on the welfare. First ship them, don't let them deal with brothers. Give them guns, step back, watch them kill each other. It's time to fight back, that's what Huey said. 2 shots in the door, now Huey's dead. I got love for my brothers, but we can never go nowhere unless we share with each other. We gotta start making changes. Learn to see me as your brothers instead of 2 distant strangers. And that's how it's supposed to be. How can you never take a brother if he's close to me? I let it go back to when we played as kids, but things changed. That's the way it is.
That's just the way it is. Yeah. Things will never be the same. They're never gonna be the same. That's just the way it is. Oh yeah.
And if I don't change, what do I got? I just want to know, if you're not changing, what's gonna happen? I just want to be seen. We all thought like we be seen and everything. Nah. We all got value. That's what we need to remember. So when we do events like this, we need to remember that we need to understand, like, we're all together as a human being. I don't even mind like about color and everything. We all together. Right now, like, I got history, you know? I'm from Africa, 100% Congolese. Like, my both parents from Congo. And now, I live in Europe, like, yo, they did a lot to be well. Like, we sacrificed many things. And us, we forget that. We come from somewhere. We got value, we got history. We got kings in our country. We got queen in our country. So if you forget that, the only thing I want Mana people to remember, at least, we have to be together. As a black people, as human beings, I don't mind if you're black, white, yellow, green, we just together. I think the only thing I want is just love.
Vivian, thank you so much. That was such a beautiful performance. I loved the final piece of that. It was so moving. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about how in which movement through your practice is a form of expression, particularly I think also in terms of cultural expression as well, because you're of Congolese heritage.
Yes, it was like, how can I say that? My background, basically, my both parents from Congo. They're born there and I'm born in Paris. And when I'm dancing, my background, like I start dancing with hip hop. I went to school, so I studied ballet, contemporary, jazz. And after because that's me, it's my foundation, I mix my culture. Like when you Congolese, you have to dance. When you go to a wedding, to a party or something, so it's all my culture. Everything was, that was everything I got in my life.
In regards to being a dancer now in London, how do you feel? Do you feel like a sense of responsibility to tell your story of your ancestry through dance, or is it just your own conceptual way of movement?
For me, when everybody does art, is an expression of ourselves. So for me, basically, I will almost say that's my duty to do it like that, to bring my background, my history, everything, because that's what I'm gonna say is just personal, yeah. But I've seen, for example, in Africa is different than in London, in Europe, or in America. So my parents did a sacrifice to move from the country to try to give me, because I know it was for us as that was for them, but that was for us, me and my sibling. So in certain way, when I got the occasion, I'm always gonna give back to where I come from. So that's one of my way to give back to my roots.
In regards to mainstream media, whenever you have had to work with musicians, or if you have a project that's come your way, have you been able to truly give them yourself 100%, or have you felt that they have ever somewhat, tried to initiate a way for you to appear? Because I feel like, especially if you're having commission projects or projects that are already dictated to you as to how they are, have you ever felt restricted, or they try to mold you in some way? Because especially with mainstream media, especially with dance, there's either commercial or there's freedom to be truly who you are. Because we've had, for instance, Robia, who's a dancer, and whenever she has choreographed her own project, she's felt much more free within herself in regards to work on commercial projects where she's toured with artists such as Rita Ora or just mainstream musicians. Have you felt there's a huge difference, or have you felt you've been able to be authentically yourself?
No. It's really different. Like she said, I think we kind of have different experience, but what she did say was exactly the truth. I did commercial for many artists, and I will never say that's me. I'm not able, even I work with different artists, I did different music video, different even performance and everything, but it's not me. When you choreograph, it's you, but it's still not really you, because you do your movement, but that's the other people, that's the dancer, they're gonna do it again. You understand what I'm saying? But me, the only time I could and I had the opportunity to be me is when you dance in a theater or contemporary. It's more I would say, because when it's commercial, that's what I say, it's like a fast food. You're going to McDonald's, you just want to eat, but we're not going there for the flavor. You understand? So the audience going to be different. They just want to see everything, if it's shine or something. But when it's more I would say underground, not really underground, but it's more for a specific audience, people really looking for see dance for real. Now the performance is different, because people going to choose you for who you are. Even if in commercials choose me for what I am, but what I'm going to do at the end of the day is not me. So that's the difference.
In terms of, because you work both across in London and in Paris, how do you feel the reception is different in terms of for your audience, and how in which you're able to be yourself and to bring your creative energy to it?
In France, it's really different. We're more like emotion and storytelling and freestyle and everything. But in London, it's more about like the performance and the show off, like poof, backflip, poof. I don't know, but it's really different. So me, I would say like I'm lucky enough. I'm not really lucky because I choose to, but for me, you gotta experience everything to really find yourself. For example, me, my first language is not English, but you say something in English, it might be a joke. But for me, for example, in French, it means nothing. Or I can give you another example in Lingala, or, you know, because everybody is different. Your body language is gonna be different. Your words you're gonna choose is gonna be different. But me, what I think as a human being, I need to experience every energy of everywhere, and like if I can learn every languages in that, to be the best version of myself. So that's what I feel.
Do you feel like in regards to the commercial dance, it will ever change in regards to them always trying to want everything to be performance? Or do you feel like you're not waiting for it to change, you're just trying to do it your own way? Because I feel like there are some people who are really trying to break the industry and making it change. But there are some people who just truly want to just navigate their own lane. Where do you feel like you would sit?
Me personally, I think I'm not the best example. Because personally, when I do like commercial job, most of the time I'm just there for the money. I will not lie to you and say, oh, I don't even like to be backup dancer. I don't even understand the concept. Like, that's mean you train all your life and you dance behind someone, and when you give the ticket to your mom, she say, oh, Beyonce. You understand what I'm saying? That's not my name, so I don't really mind. You understand what I'm saying? So me, what I do is like, I like to do a commercial, anything, any type of job, like dance job, I learn. But at the end of the day, I know myself. In like a couple of years, I know I might gonna stop dancing, because I don't want to do that all my life. That was a dream when I was a kid. Now I'm in the industry, okay, but what I really want to do is like I just want to create. I prefer just to create things. I just prefer to say something, because for me, art is saying something. So yeah.
So what do you want to do instead?
Yeah.
What's next? What's next?
What's next? What you mean, like in a couple of weeks, months, years?
No. In regards to, you said that when you were a child that you liked the idea and you wished to do the idea of dancing, and now you're doing that. Yeah. So what do you feel is next for you? In another way to express yourself other than movement.
What's gonna happen next is like for maximum 5 years. Maximum. I'm gonna create my own company. Like just relate to dance, yeah. I'm going to create my own company, and I will use. I don't really want to say everything because I'm not gonna lie. I know exactly what I want to do is right and everything. It's just like I want to give a different experience of dance, and I want like to dancer to understand like a dancer is powerful. Because most of the time, people when they use in many type of industry, a dancer, for me, sometimes it's even useless. And like in a way, like you're not gonna be you're just gonna do this type of movement. But people are so different. Dance is like human being. If I talk to you, if I talk to the next person, you're really different. So that's why I'm like, I just wanna like bring some real individual. They say and they show to the audience who they truly are, and me, I will put like my message on it, and that's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to be like give me 5 years.
How come 5 years? Why are you? choosing this 5-year mark?
Because Sade is always like, I have to do everything and do it now.
Basically, I feel like, yeah, basically.
I get where you're coming from. Why I choose 5 years? Because I just don't want to do that. Like, I want, for example, I want to have my own property. In the meantime, I want to everything. Sorry, I know what I wanted to say, but I was like, relax. So yeah, but I got other project.
Yeah.
So that's why I say maximum 5 years. I know like exactly what I want to do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Vivian. And like your performance was really beautiful and moving this evening. We are now going to open the conversation, and we're going to be joined by Othello, who will talk us through his creative practice. So thank you, Vivian.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to introduce yourself, Othello, and your work?
My name is Othello D'Souza Hartley.
Use the microphone.
Oh, sorry. I love the voice, so. Yeah, my name is Othello D'Souza Hartley. I'm a visual artist.
Amazing. Okay, so I came across your work through our best friend's social media. There's a love-hate relationship with that, right, as we both know. And originally, I approached you in regards to Anticlone because I planned to do another visual and also online platform of showcasing artists who do not conform to suit society, in short. But then I came across your work and saw that you had an exhibition, and we had a mutual understanding. And
A mutual understanding. That's,
that's the best way to put it. Right?
Yeah. Should we
And
talk about this mutual understanding?
Yeah, go for
about
it.
not being defined?
Exactly.
Because it's really weird, because it is called Black Exchange. And so I would just continue the conversations that I've reached a point now when, if I've been doing lots of interviews recently, so people who interview me start off with, you're a black artist. So I have decided now in my career, where I am now, is that if you come to me with that narrative first, then I won't get involved. So you have to come to me as a person, as an artist, and research my work and come to me as a person. And the reason why I do that is because if they're working with an artist of another culture or race, if you want to call it, they sort of talk about the person. And I feel that we've reached a point now when I'm going to demand that, and I'm quite confident to say that I'm comfortable in myself and my work and my practice, that I don't have to accept things of the past. So now if you're going to approach me, whether you're a journalist or anything, or you talk to me about my work, and if you come to me with that, I would literally say no. Do your research, understand me, but don't come with your preconceived narratives of what I should be.
How do you feel that the industry that you're in, you've managed to obviously have the strength to be able to say no, because so many other artists don't? What made you finally feel like you came to that point?
I think it's through conversations and talking to other artists of colour who just want freedom. And it's okay if you want to be part of it, it's okay, but sometimes you're forced into it. So I'm like, I am a really strong-headed person. So it's like, I don't really care, because people would present me with opportunities and say it's opportunities, but I've reached a point when saying, no, it's not opportunities.
Trying to put you in the box.
My work is strong enough, so you're not giving me an opportunity, you're just recognizing my work. So if you change the narrative from saying someone's giving you an opportunity to saying, no, I should be on that platform. So that is how I've changed it. So it's no longer, before it would be like, oh, thank you for this opportunity, but now it's like, no. I deserve the opportunity, so I'm not going to bow down to you, the narrative that you want. So it's kind of the thing like I look at it now, is like, if you're sitting on the table, you're not a higher position than me, we're on the same table. So when you meet me, you're going to meet me as Othello, as the artist who's put in the work to do what I do and continue to do the work. So you are not there and I am here begging you. It's like you are coming to me because I have something
To offer the
yeah.
table.
And you're something to me, so we meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
you are there,
higher, yeah.
I'm giving you this kind of like handouts. No, so yeah.
That's good. It's powerful. Shall we actually quickly put the other side on whilst Anna continues on the next question?
I was just going to say, before we start talking through your work, Othello, in the way in which you can kind of end up being tokenized in a way, do you think there's a way in which you can kind of use that to your advantage, because I feel like there is kind of almost a huge question that I think mainstream media is asking and wanting from black artists and creatives, that there's kind of a missing narrative, and it's how in which you can kind of almost sometimes manipulate situations in order to to give the work that you want to give out anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I admit I could be perceived as the one of those artists you just mentioned, one of those tokenism artists. I admit that. But what I do for myself is how you use that position. So like I have an open call at my studio. I have lots of people who are around age 16 to 18, maybe 18-year-olds, who come to my studio and they say, like, they call me up and say, hello, like, I'm, like one guy actually recently, he just called me up, I think he just graduated and he was like, I'm really stuck, Othello, what do I do? So come up to my studio. And literally he came there and he was like, I'm so stuck, what do I do? And I gave him a few tips. And literally in 10 minutes he was like, I've got it. And he left. And I have a lot of people come into my studio, so this is my way of using that position. So if you come to me and say, look, I just want some advice, I will give you my time. Just come to the studio. I have an open call, so I always do that. And it's different people. Or someone wrote to me recently and was like, I just need some guidance. And I would say, I'll get back to you. And I'll always get back to you. So I think that's the position that I use. So it's always giving that advice or being a person that you can come to and, just talk to.
Do you feel like you've taken that responsibility?
No, it's something that I want to do. It's not responsibility.
No,
I just see it as something that I want to do because obviously I grew up not far from here, and it's like the arts is always seen as this thing that you're not part of, or it's seen as very prestigious, or the word middle class comes into context in this. So for me, it's like, no, art should be for everybody, and it shouldn't be in this little bubble. So if I felt that when I was growing up, my thing to do is to make sure that everybody feels inclusive. So even like my exhibition, when you came to it, it was in Piccadilly. It's quite a prestigious gallery, and it was nice. It was a nice space. And the guy walked past, and he was standing at the door, and the woman said to me, oh, he won't come in. So I went up to him, just left everybody and went up to him, and I said to him, come in. It's a black guy. And he was like, oh, I just came from work, got my overalls on. I said, man, don't worry about it. Just come and enjoy the art. But he didn't. He chose not to come in because he felt that thing, like, this is this barrier, this is this door. I should be a certain person to occupy this space. So I went outside and I was like, bro, when you come inside, please, you should come inside. And it's not just about color, because the same thing happened the last day of the exhibition. These two, sort of, I wouldn't say the word Essex, I hate to say the word Essex, but they were two women, white women, and they were saying the same thing from the outside. And I said, come in, and they were like, no, no. And then they were like, we're not really into art. And there was really Cockney, proper Cockneys, East Londoners, like, we're not really into art. Da, da, da. I was like, nah, come and appreciate it, until they came into the gallery. Unfortunately, the other guy, he didn't come in, because he really felt like he wasn't dressed the right way. But these two women came in, they go, oh, I don't really go to galleries, I'm like, do you know what was nice is that they were allowed to come into this space. It's not an exclusive place, and I hate this kind of exclusivity that some people feel that they shouldn't cross that line, invisible barriers.
Exactly. So we've got some pictures up of your work. I wanted you to speak on some of them. These are the ones that I was obsessed with when I first came across them. We had the paintings before.
Okay.
Maybe perhaps talk about these and then we'll go back to the painting.
So this piece was called, I was going to do this whole piece with black women, and particularly dark-skinned black women, because you talked about colorism, and
that was our first topic.
Yeah, and my ex-girlfriend, she's very dark, and we spoke a lot about this colorism thing, and even she had issues about colorism, and even the issue like being about mixed race women and feeling that, there's how when she was growing up, there was always this thing about if you're a dark-skinned woman, you feel like you're not attractive, and even things like if you wear certain clothes, that if your clothes are dark, you should be wearing from her family, wearing lighter clothes. So anyway, all these conversations in my head, I really wanted this project with dark-skinned women, but I used one woman, and it just stopped there, and this filmmaker wrote this quote on Instagram, and it's called "Reclaim the Hue." So I call it "Reclaim the Skin." So, and I'm going to leave it as one picture, because this picture's been, it's got a lot of attraction, and I thought, you don't need to make a whole project. Sometimes it could be one picture. So one picture is called Reclaim the Skin, and it says it in one. The second one is a performance. So I've always, as a black guy growing up in London, again, it's just people putting you into a sort of a narrative. You have to be this, and it's not just white people, it's people as well. It's like, you have to be this, and if you're anything alternative, are you gay? Are you this? There's all these questions about you as a person if you don't fit a certain stereotype. And about 2 years ago, this was playing on my mind. So I did this cheeky performance to a Polaroid camera, and it was called Own Narrative. And this is like me saying, I don't really care what box you put me in. You know, if I was gay, I'd be really open. I would say I was. I grew up, I have a mum that was married to somebody previously, and we've always had conversations about this. And so if I was, I would have a family that would support me. But it was like, so people who come with that narrative to me because of the way I am, it doesn't bother me. So this piece was called Own Narrative, and it was like me saying, I'm just going to be who I am. The work that I do, I use my body. I come from a performance background. When I was a teenager, I went to WAC in Camden, so I did a lot of performance. And it was a performance piece to a Polaroid camera, and it was just me saying, this is who I am. I really don't care what box you want to put me in, because I'm free. I'm free of this kind of, in a way, this kind of masculine thing. So one of the projects I did was a 10-year project about masculinity, and I feel that I'm free from all those sort of things. I can just be me now. I don't really care.
Do you feel like that came with time?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there are some people who instantly know what they stand for, and they always make sure that with all of their mediums that they're able to illustrate that. But then even the concept of you being able to explore photography, paintings, and drawings, that can take time for people. Because, for instance, when I was at university, I went to London College of Fashion, and though I came from doing fashion design, I also had an arts background because my mother went to Campbell College of Arts, and then I also saw painting and photography and graphics. But even when you do a degree, you almost feel like, even at uni, you have to specify which subject you wish to go in. But with you, automatically, you've kind of explored everything.
I think that comes from my dad, because my dad always said to me, like, you can be anything you want.
And it's like your foundations are up.
Yeah, so I had a really good foundation, a dad who was like, you can be anything you want, and just believe in yourself and do what you feel that you want to do. So it was like, those words have always jumped into my head, just be what you want to be.
But that's quite rare, because especially I feel like I grew up with a black mother. My dad was Latino and European. But with that, I had a mother who was working within education, but working within the arts, and I feel like a lot of black people especially, it's not the path or the career path that is chosen.
Oh, let me tell you the background story, Dana. When I was
us.
always good at arts at school, and when I was doing GCSEs, my dad was like, no. So I did.
What changed?
Do you know what? It's you doing what you truly believe, and then him getting to a point and realized. And we had this conversation about 2 years ago. We were sitting in the living room, and he just said to me, and it's out of the blue. You know, like fathers don't say much. So my dad was watching TV. It was like a Sunday, because I always visit on a Sunday. So we were sitting there watching TV, and he was like, maybe you've got it right. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I didn't get a chance to explore myself. Because when he was growing up, it was like, you get an education or whatever, and you get a job, and you have a family. And you don't question that. You don't question that if that is you or not. It's like, this is what you do.
But I think it's also, especially if like second immigrant families, you know, like second generation immigrant families, it's almost this complex of, you need to go to university, you need to get a degree. It's all very structured as to how it should be.
And they never got a chance to, my dad openly admitted it, he never really got a chance to explore himself. And so, in a way, it was
him making sure that you didn't do the same.
Yeah, and it was kind of like an admiration in a way, because at first it was the other way, you have to follow that route. But then it's over time, maybe he was reflecting, he didn't never mention it because, you know, fathers don't open and talk.
Why do you think this is an issue with our community? Not that it is, but I'm stating it is.
I just think it's a time, you just don't talk. And I guess my dad was reflecting over this all the years, and in that brief moment he came out and said it, which I didn't even know he was thinking it. So maybe over the years he was thinking about it, like, did I really get a chance to explore my true, or the person he was? He just followed what was norm to him. Yeah.
So if you were to give advice for other young artists, what would the advice be?
It's like this, and this is how I treat life. You get on the train ride, get on the train, and you just follow your dream, right? It might have some bends, it might have a few little incidents, but you've got to believe in your dream. And you think, if anything about this time now tells you how things can just turn in a second, and everything goes upside down.
Pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it's like, follow your dream. It's like, what do you have to lose? You know what I mean? And it also depends if you're a very materialistic person or not. If you're a materialistic person, then that's a different story altogether. But if that's your dream, follow it. But what I say is like, you just got to follow your dream. And like you said, sacrificing. I've had to do other things. I've interned. I've worked in galleries. I do a bit of workshops. And now it's kind of like, it's a bit different now. But I've done all that, to survive, right? I've even done calling up market research one time, like calling people up. I've done all that. But I feel that if you have a dream, you just got to follow that dream with all the pain, all the things that you go through. But in the day, it's like you've only got one life. And why not just, in the end, just say, you know what, I did it. And and I actually met a guy years ago who was 73 at the time. And he said to me that he, in the 60s, I keep meeting these people, and he had said that in the 60s, all his friends were saying, you can't go and live in Italy. He liked tailoring. And he's a black guy, right? This is the thing. And they were like, oh no, you can't go to Italy. They're not like black people. And he said, okay. So he just left, went to Italy.
Well, this is the thing, though. That's a great, strength to have. Not everybody has that, especially
This is
in this
why
day and
I'm
age.
saying it's really good to have people who can surround
community.
yourself and mentor you. You know what I mean? Because I've had friends of all different ages, but it's really good. So someone like meeting him, who was like, I just went to Italy. All his friends were saying he's mad. He said he lived there for years as a tailor. Then he went to France, did a tailoring in France, and he came back and he was just like, do you know what? I've lived my life. And he told me a story about his daughter's boyfriend who came to him and said, oh, I couldn't find a job. And he said to him, is England the only place in the world?
But that's the thing. I think when you see, especially in the media, the way they portray the Western world to be this, even with America, you've got that concept of American dream. Yet you have Trump, but that's a different story. But, it's like this concept of the Western world always being the place where everything has to happen.
Yeah.
If you can't make it in America or you can't make it in London, then you can't.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, if you have a passion in it and an art, you can really do that anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Could you talk to us about the third
Right, so
photograph?
this is another one of those things that I do in life. So I always have set myself goals in life, and it's usually outside of my comfort zone. So about 2017, I just got really fed up with London because there's an art shop at the end of my road. If you live in East London, there's art shops everywhere, and it's so cool. It's so easy to find people who think like you, and they fit into the narrative, and it's like, and that's what you want, and you get spoiled. So I just thought, where can I go where I don't know anybody? And so I found out about this residency in Uganda.
How did you find out about the residency?
I just heard about it. And what I did was something that is you just never do. Usually everybody emails and goes, I just picked up my mobile phone and said, I just want to get out of London. And I literally called them and I was like, hi, I'm this artist from London. And they were like, hello? I was like, yeah, I'm an artist from London. I want to come to Uganda. And the woman was so surprised. She was like, can you just send us some of your work? Sent them the work. And then I had no money to go, but properly, because it was 7 weeks in Uganda. And again, if you trust this inner belief, so they accepted. And then I was like, right, I've got to survive 7 weeks and still pay my rent. So I had no, and literally, then I said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. So what I did, I started talking to people, everybody I met some guy who happened to be, they do this exchange between East Africa and London, a Gasworks gallery. He called me in for a meeting and he was like, hello, who's sponsoring this? Because we send some British artists to Uganda to do an exchange. I said, nobody. He was like, nobody's sponsoring you. This was like a month before I was about to leave, or 2 months. So he was like, can we help you? And I was like, yeah, please. And then he said, okay, we'll pay your fare. That's nice. And then I spoke to somebody else, just hold conversations and keep talking. And it's like you reinforce the things and you bring it to life. Then someone at this university said, oh, we need to connect to Africa. And it was a really thing because I think the next wave, they were saying the middle classes are going to come from Africa. You know, the university is always looking for the next wave. It's Chinese right now. Ended up getting a sponsorship. My whole...
before?
No, yeah, listen, a month before, they paid for my accommodation. So literally a month before I go, everything came into place. But literally, I was going to go with no money and I was going to do it. which limited money, but literally everything came through in a month. It was mad, but that's only by just speaking up and saying, I'm doing this thing, and it happened.
So you feel like you were literally having to speak to every single person you met?
You know what, if you want something, because someone said to me, it's like one of these things, like, I always get advice from people, they say, like, you don't know how close you are to certain people, but if you open your mouth, if you stay quiet, no one knows what you want. If you open your mouth and say, I need, people might not know somebody, they might know somebody, so I opened my mouth. So I went to Uganda, and I just met loads of people from all different age groups in Uganda, and I started off with, they gave me this shipping container. That's what I had for a studio. And the only thing I knew about Uganda was the red soil. So I asked this local guy just to get me some red soil, and we started from there. And I started building this installation, which was an installation at first, and then it became photographs in the last day, 2 days. But I built this through conversations, like the background is called bark cloth, which is particularly in the area, but it's not that colour. And there's a kind of a thing with the younger generation who I met who want to stay in Uganda and want to change the narrative of Africa. They don't want to come to Europe, but they want to do business with Europe. But they've been held back by a president who's been there for like over 35 years. He's been there longer than, it's the second youngest generation in Africa. So they've been held back by somebody, and some of them, he was being in power longer than he'd been born. Most people.
So what made you go to Uganda?
I just wanted to go there.
Yeah?
Because I've got this thing about East Africa.
Okay.
So I went there.
Is that your ancestry? Or no, you just have a
There's
love
some
for it?
rumour, but I don't know. But I wanted to go Ethiopia, to be honest with you. But I went to Uganda.
Uganda was the second
right?
option.
I went to Uganda, right? And then it's like people, and they all kept saying this thing about, we don't want to live in Europe. And it's just like, they said, we're so fed up with this Western narrative of Africa. We just want handout. And they all kept saying it. And I was like,
It's true though, because of the media, how they always portray Africa to be somewhere that is a place of age.
Exactly.
But yeah.
And then the materials in the background you see is bark cloth, which is synonymous with this area. But these people who are trying to make it really contemporary, so there's some designers out there making clothes out of it, and there's a guy who's changing the pigments of it. So I used that, and then the soil. Then this was goat rope that I kept seeing around the back streets. So I wanted to dye it. So it's different to being in London. You go to an art shop, you have to get on this Buddha. So there's like a taxi, and you get on the back of it. It's crazy, because every time you get on, it's like this motorcycle taxi, and you've got no helmet, and everybody just does this on the roads, and you're just life in your hand. So I go to this market, and you have to walk through these little...
It's freeing though, I get it, because I did a residency in Marrakesh, and for me, going into the Medina, I was crazy inspired at the noises, the smells, everything, even in regards to the culture.
Yeah.
But I think that's... obviously, like, as you say, you don't believe you're Ugandan, but even when you step foot on African soil, there's something.
Yeah. But then what's good about it is you go to an art shop and someone says to you, "Oh, this is the
art shop." It's
this is the experience I want to tell you." It's like the experience and the spiritual experience is like you go to London, you say art shop, and they go, "Here's all the dyes." So I have to go through these markets, and every particular place is where people sell something. So there's these Arabic women, they're black Muslims, and they were sitting there all on the floor. So I was trying to explain, but then we had it's like these little connections, and just telling you about the dyes. But I mean, it was like everything had this like spiritual connection, like a meaning. So I came back and died, and then the people and the connections, and people never really asked me where I was from. They didn't even think I was from London. So I had loads, and then
that's the thing. When you are in London, that's the first question: where are you from?
Exactly. They just assumed that I was somewhere from there, and that was. So that was this. I made this work, and then the kanzu, what the men wear, were brought in by the Arabs. And because I was thinking of this contemporary thing and bridging this gap between different generations, and because I wear a lot of black, I thought I was going to get a local person to make it in black. And then everybody was like, "Oh, it's so contemporary," and that's what I wanted. So it was like traditional things, and listen to what people were saying. And there's something that I adopted out there was not talking, staying in silence. Because once you go to certain spaces, because we are from Europe, if you speak and then or you mention you're from there, there's a lot of questions become centered around you. So I just adopted a thing where you stay silent and just listen to conversations and into an open studio, and people came and talked.
So when you created all of the work, did you think about where you wanted it to be exhibited once you were back in London, or you just create and see where it happens
I just made the
next?
work, and then only last year, I wanted to print these pictures, if I do have an exhibition, on the actual bark cloth, because you can get bark cloth paper. It took me 2 years to get the paper they have to make it by hand. And then it took me, once they had all the paper made, it took me maybe a year to get it to London.
But when you explain the process, especially to, we have this complex, especially within the arts, you have established artists and then you have up and coming. When you were approached, or if you approached them, the established galleries in Piccadilly and Mayfair, how did you find the reaction to your work?
No, they're just fine. The only thing that I get for me is because people say, I don't know where to, not so much to that gallery.
I had that talk.
Yeah, they just don't know where to place me because they're like, I'm not lying, I went to St. Martin's, I went to Campbell School of Art. So I did go to some good art schools. And obviously the way you dress and stuff, so they don't know where to place you. And I've literally, I think I told you about this experience. Someone put a call out when I first graduated, someone put a call out for black creatives, and they want young creatives, and I turned up to this place in Islington, and the guy said to me, you're not raw enough for me. And I was like, why would you say that? Because it's like, you wouldn't say it to anybody else. He was like, you're not raw enough.
What, did you ask him what he meant?
I knew exactly what he meant.
Yeah, but
what he
did
means
you
is
ask
that
him
you
straight?
challenged him.
Yeah.
Because I'm not silly, it's like you challenge, he doesn't want someone, so obviously, so the thing that I get is where do you place you? Because they want you to either do an aesthetic that's very African, which is nothing wrong with that at all, because if that's the kind of work you do, that's fine. But I had a gallery before, and they wanted to understand that my work is quite dark, and it's not black, it's not really cut, so it's like you're not fitting into that narrative. And people are like, oh.
That's what we discussed about 154 Gallery.
Exactly,
exactly. I was in Somerset House. Even though the artists, of course, are all incredible in their own right, they all have a similar concept. It's all very
and it's who's controlling that.
Typical. But the people who are controlling it are not.
And they want that. So if they don't identify, it's like, and this is the things that why I've changed this thing about when people say black artists, because they're trying to limit you and not give you freedom. So it's like, if you're from the Caribbean, you're going to do a certain type of art. So it's like, no, this is what I do. And then they don't know where to place you, because it's like, oh, well, where do I put you? You don't fit into the African art market. You don't fit into this market. But it's like, just call me an artist and put my work out there. Yeah.
But do you feel like you've had to mainly do it yourself? Or do you feel like...
Like I said to you, you've got to have thick skin. You've got to keep going yourself, and you've got to keep pushing it and keep working on your work so that your work stands for itself. You know what I mean? So it's like you're going to keep going, and then at some point, hopefully, people are going to because if you keep working, you get better at your work. And it's like, if you've really got thick skin, your work I truly believe your work will take you there. It might be hard, but it will take you there. And it depends on what you mean taking it there, but it will, I don't know, it's like, how can I put it? It's just like, you're like the pain that never goes away. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not going to give up. So you could try and...
That's the thing, not everyone has that constant desire to keep never giving up, because especially with the arts industry, there's so many doors that you have to break through to enable you to make the next step. But I think that's good advice to give for the younger generation.
And also you said something else, well, don't get fooled by social media. I swear to you, 100%. Do not. There's so many people who look at social media and think everybody's doing better than me. And social media is like a dressed up theatre. Right? And it's great. Social media is perfect, but it's dressing up. It's like theatre. Everybody puts a performance on, and you can sit there thinking, oh, my friend's doing so well. No. I'm going to stop.
These are the rest of them.
Oh, yeah, this is something good here.
And the next slide? I think there should be another one. Could you...
That's own narrative again.
Who... Is this you?
It's me, yeah. I use my own body in my work. Okay. In some of my work, shall I say.
And then there's one more final slide, I think.
Oh, that's the finished piece.
So did you end up exhibiting these, or did you?
Yeah, exhibited it last week.
Oh, okay.
And I exhibited it. The first time we got exhibit was in Rome. So I took it to Rome in 2018, and then it got exhibited at Piccadilly.
How have you found it being exhibiting at the Piccadilly?
Really good. It's really good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
All
thank
right.
you so much for giving us all of the information regarding it.
Yeah, cool.
Amazing.
Do you want to introduce yourself? Well, so I'm Emmanuel. I would describe myself as a writer, work in fashion, and I'm also the creator of a page called The Little Black Diary, where I talk about the African diaspora in Europe. That's pretty much.
So I remember we met at the last Black Exchange exhibition on the bus after as well.
Exactly.
And then you started talking to me about the podcast that you do, as well as where you were working before, because we both come from fashion and you worked for Matches, no?
Exactly.
And then we were having that whole entire conversation about being usually maybe perhaps seen as the token, or there's only one or very few of you within the office. And that's how it was for me when I was more into the fashion industry. How do you feel working there and now working for yourself? What's making you feel different about it?
Well, in terms of office space, I would say that when I started working in fashion, it was not in a city like London. I was in Munich, which is it is one of the fashion capital of Germany. So let's say it was very different from London, in the sense that I barely see any black people in the city. And the only black people I saw were expats in the office with me, and all happened to be French. So I don't think, in the sense of tokenism, I don't know. Because in the office, I didn't have any experience that made me feel so, because we were the French. So I feel like when you go abroad, for example, and you say, okay, I'm French and you're black, people tend to better accept the idea more than French people. So if you said, obviously you would have the question, okay, you're French, we talk, and they were also quite sensitive of not asking but where are you really from? I didn't hear this kind of question. So that was the thing.
But do you think there's also, I think sometimes when you can go to a new place, people can not have those, whereas like, because I find here in England, I get asked more where I'm from than if I go anywhere else. Like, even if you go to, like, I go to America to visit my sister, and, oh, you're from England, and it's just, yeah, that's cool. But whereas, like, if you're trying to say you are from England and being black or being mixed race, there's this kind of questioning that you can't really be. So sometimes going to a new place kind of takes that away from it.
Yeah, I think so, because I studied in Italy too, and that was the case. So when I was there, I was just a French girl, as opposed to when I saw black Italians, they were like, oh, these, N-word people in the country, always.
In Italy?
Yeah, when they talk about black Italians, this is how they describe them, But me, I was like, oh, the little French girl, she has a nice French accent when she speaks, we love her. Then obviously you would have situations where you would see the racism, but it was not like any black Italian would experience. I would say like I was kind of privileged to be French, kind of. Whereas if I go back to my experience in France, for example, is not the case.
Is that why? Because you said when you were talking about your experience, that's why you ended up making your project. Do you want to speak more about as to why it came up?
So, after I've lived in Italy, lived in Germany, and came to London. So I was born in Cameroon, which is my country, and came to France. So after all this experience, so when you grow up in France, you only have the experience of, first of all, meeting Africans who, or black French, who belongs to, their background is from the ex-French colonies, so have a certain, setting. And there is also one narrative they want you to fit in, is that you are obviously from Paris. I'm not from Paris. I'm from a city called Bordeaux. And that you are from the banlieue, so the suburbs, and you are kind of, a thug, kind of. That's most of the narrative they like to hear. And I am absolutely not that. And also that you have these people that, they want to put this narrative onto you, that you are this kind of person. And I experienced I have a first trigger when I was a tour guide. I was a tour guide in a castle, in an old castle next to Paris, 1 hour away from Paris or something. And all the people that asked me where I were from, how come did I speak so well French, where did I went to school, were French. All the visitors that were foreigners, I did my, my visit, and they were happy. And I remember one woman who, because also I have a very French name, so my name is Emmanuelle Maréchal. So for any French people who see me, because I have that name, and I don't have any accent when I speak French, I must be from the Caribbean, French Caribbean, so there is this thing. And this lady, when she came, she asked me where I was from. I already found this thing offensive, you know, from the beginning, like, who are you to ask me to know where I am from? Why should I tell you, disclose on
Something that we all get everywhere.
my information like this? I'm not asking you where you're from, so why are you doing this to me? But she insisted, and I was like, okay, so I have Cameroonian background, and she's like, but how come your name is sound French? I was like, why do I have to explain that? Because she was like, oh, but you know so well the history of France, and you must be from the French Caribbean to know that, because if you are African, you wouldn't know. And I was like, yeah, I went to school in France, you know, even though the story is very whitewashed, that's still not the story, you know, so this kind of experiences, you know, made me start, you know, thinking, okay, there is something wrong with the way French perceive me, because I feel French with no issue. I also feel Cameroonian, there is no issue, you know, I don't know why it should be a problem to be both, you know, but they only see one side, and I'm a little bit tired. So at the time, you know, I was studying Italian, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go and do an Erasmus in Italy, you know. And also there, when I arrived, that was another experience, because I barely see any black people at the time. All the black people I saw were street vendors, so they were illegal immigrants. So it made me wonder what, you know, what Italian people saw in black people. And at the time, I wasn't also aware of the Italian colonial history. But as I went, you know, along, and because I ended up living in the country for 5 years, I was like, they have a colonial past, but they just don't talk about it. But like, I think it's worse than in England or France. Is really worse, because for them it's like they would tell you we were better than the French and the British because we only have 4 or 5 colonies. I was like, it's not a number. Belgium had 2 colonies. Have you seen what they did? Like, no,
So it's not a competition.
Exactly. And they also believe in that narrative that they just came because they have a different type of colonialism that instead of exploiting, they exploit it still, but it's a different, because historically, Italy is a country that always had political issues and poverty. And so you have a lot of Italians that immigrated elsewhere. So colonialism was created right after the unification of Italy, just to avoid unemployment. So we're going to send you in those colonies, and you're going to get a job there and make your life there, to say we are an empire and we are prospering. So this is how it differs. So that's why Italians believe that they went to I don't know, Somalia, Eritrea, or Libya just to build bridges and museums and things like this.
It's interesting in which these countries kind of create these narratives in order to have a complete avoidance and not take responsibility. Because it's the same in this country, because we didn't have slavery physically on this soil.
Exactly.
British people will act like they weren't involved in slavery, but this is how we got a Windrush generation and whatnot, because of the colonial history with the Caribbean. So it's kind of interesting, because I think in comparison to America, which is a history it can't hide from, and it's kind of similarly also in terms of Germany's history. Their history is so overt that the country has to acknowledge its past. So I think there's a lot of European countries who are in this kind of middle ground where they can almost act as if they were never involved with it and become almost exempt from their role in it.
Yeah, and I also think that problem with Europe, because a lot of countries, for example, Italy is very law and constitution is inspired by the French constitution, and you all know how French we We brag about, oh, we are the country of the human rights. We abolished slavery. Mind you that we abolished slavery twice. We are the only country who did that, but that's okay. And I think Italy copied, the kind of French system, so they believe, they are this rightful country too. And they have this mythology that there is this mythology where they call themselves Italiani brava gente, so the good Italians, the good people. And they created that myth.
Yeah, they created the narrative themselves. But in your podcast that that I've only just recently started to listen to, what made you feel more inspired to start that?
My family.
Yeah? And do you speak about all of these matters fully throughout each podcast, or what's the main subjects that you're working on at the moment?
So there is first it started with my family story, because as nobody can see, my family is interracial. My mother, she's Cameroonian black, my father is white French, and my brother is mixed. So having all this mix, I was always tired when people were coming to me, be it black people or white people, and wanting me to fit into a certain narrative that, I wasn't fitting in. So that's why I wanted to tell my story via this podcast and the Instagram page. And once I started this, I received a lot of messages from people from all walks of life. And that was quite surprising to me, because I was expecting maybe, I don't know, more mixed or black people, and you also had white people in the story. I thought, what are you doing here? But that was quite interesting, what I had as a response. So after that, I was like, okay, since I'm also living in London, and I've also had experiences of living in different countries, I've seen that in all these countries it's very different to be black, and if you have different background depending on the colonial history of the country. So I also started to interview black Europeans, about who they grew up in the country, what was their experience, what is their knowledge of the colonial past of the country they live in. For example, I had this friend I interviewed who is from Guinea-Bissau, and she grew up in Portugal, and I think, seriously, as a French person, I don't know much about Guinea-Bissau, and I don't know much about the colonization of Portugal, of other African countries, when, it's probably the country that had, all the decolonization process, as we know, is in the 60s. For Portugal, is in the 70s. Mm-hmm. So, this kind of story, and also the way they perceive black people. When actually you had black people in Portugal in the 16th century, as of the 16th century, you had who you call that, even black noble, who were nobles, So I think it's quite interesting to notice that we have been there. As soon as you have a connection with another continent, you always have exchanges, and we've been there since forever. So that's what I want to do with my podcast, to explain that. Because when they talk about immigration, it's as if it's a new.
So that it would be predating slavery.
Exactly.
Whereas there was a black presence in England prior. I think the earliest remains they actually found in this country were black remains.
Yeah.
But I actually wanted to ask you, in terms of having your experience of living in London and of living in France, because there's a different attitude in terms of nationality, and we've got this idea of multiculturalism, and that we are supposed to embrace, and you'll be able to hold on to your individuality. Whereas I know in France it's very different, because you had the bans on the burqas, and there's very much control, even though in this country we say we are accepting, but to what extent is still questionable.
So I think in France it's that I always have this discussion, you feel like you are more free to be black in some spaces more than other, and I feel myself more here than in France, for example, because I know there are certain topics I cannot speak about, with people.
Why do you feel like you cannot?
Because people get really aggressive with you. And they want to make you, it's always like, you always have to, it's been the case with my father that we need to be more French than Cameroonian, for example. It's not like we can be both. That it's not like about being, 50-50. It's not that. It's just that because we are this blend, obviously, we are who we are. But in France, you are always asked to choose, not asked. They demand that you are more, in my opinion. You need to be more French. And there is also this thing, I also think that, because when if you are born in France, you are French, but...
You mentioned something about Italy, whereas if you're born in Italy and you're black, you don't get your citizenship.
No, you don't have any citizenship, no. If your parents are immigrants and you're born in Italy, you are not Italian, you get the nationality of your parents. You are not Italian, and you get the nationality. I mean, you can ask for the nationality at 18. But if you get out of the country for whatever reason, you lose that right to be Italian. So it creates a lot of psychological problem for black Italians. They have a lot of issues to deal with. But to go back to France, so I think they think that because we, if you're born in France, you are French, or if you come when you're a child, you and end up having the French nationality, we should be like, oh, thank you so much, for giving us that nationality and stuff. And there is this thing where I think they feel shocked if we are not grateful. So I think France is much more, so we have all these principles of, freedom, human rights, because, we inspired, I say Italy, but the US also, were inspired by France a lot.
Because you guys protest a lot over there.
Yeah, but for nothing. I think it's a national sport right now. It's not, it does not make any sense anymore. But yeah, so I think we have a very close-minded vision of what means to be French, and we don't understand that because you rightly have colonization and slavery before, it created this movement, and obviously these people came in the country. There should be an understanding, and that's the main discussion right now, for example, with Arabic people and some of men, because not all of them obviously are Muslims, and all this question about wearing the burqa, the veil or not, which for me is not a problem. Should be just more a matter of, let's discuss together and try to find a way to live together, and instead it's always like, no, you have to abide by our principles that dates back from the 17th century. It does not make sense.
So with all of the podcasts that you're doing currently, are you speaking about all of these matters, or what's your next step? Because I know that you've got quite a lot already that are out there, and you're now putting the platform on Instagram and social media, but what do you feel the next step is after podcast or during?
So right now I'm working on, because I stopped for a while because I was working, I got sick too, so that's why I stopped a little bit, but yeah, so the podcast is developed into chapters, so where I use these chapters to tell about my family, and then you have epilogues
Where can you see the podcast again? Just so
Spotify.
Okay, we'll make sure to put the link on.
And you have epilogues where this is where I interview people. Right now, I'm thinking about expanding more on my family with the podcast, in the sense that starting this project, because it was out of love for my family, you also start to discover some sides you're not happy with your family, especially when you have a white father, and even my mother, in the sense that my mother was born right after the independence of Cameroon, so she has a vision that is quite, all French people, they are so great, without them, the country wouldn't, Exactly. So having this discussion with my parents, where sometimes is let's say constructive, and sometimes they just drive me nuts, not to say. So I'm trying to incorporate these thoughts, these exchanges my parents don't speak English, so I'm trying to write, the script of the podcast, putting this into mind. For example, I have one episode I'm going to put after that is about my father trying to explain why that even though he did the job at the time with my brother, trying to understand, at his level what systemic racism did to us, he kind of stopped. It's like, okay, I've done my job. Right now, finished. There is no problem. So try to explain why he thinks like this, because my dad was born in 1945, so when France still had colonies. And when he explained me how he grew up, it was kind of interesting to know that he grew up in an environment where colonialism was kind of everywhere, even though it didn't seem so. You go to the cinema to see the movies. Before watching the movie, you have the news telling you how it happens in the colonies, and they make you believe that the people in the colonies are French like you. And then you go to the uni, and you have these Africans from the colonies coming to the uni, and you see that they are treated in a different way, but you still don't grasp that it's problematic. Then my father also worked more than 30 years in Occidental Africa, in the bank system, and he worked in his first job was in a bank organization that was created by Napoleon III. He arrived in Africa in 1977, so all these things. So working in banking also meant that he was part of this system of France-Afrique. So it's basically this economical system where France is basically making the money for our African ex-colonies, French colonies, So, I think if you are in this kind of environment, you still have issues,
I wanted to ask you, in terms of working in media, because obviously you've created your own platform with your podcast, but I think in contrast to making your own spaces, I'm still in my personal practice and just kind of being aware of mainstream media and what's happening. Like, for instance, the BBC only just announced a couple of days ago that all of their employees are not allowed to attend any black protests or any prides, or you could be fired. So, and the BBC is our main news and entertainment. It's quintessentially British television. So I think, how do you feel in terms of being an independent creator in creating media? It's almost as if, it's weird to say like you're trying to counteract, because I feel that's kind of annoying, and that's kind of like they use a term like stereotypes, and that we're like making work that is anti-stereotypes, but instead we're actually kind of telling our own stories and talking about our own history. How do you feel about the relationship between your work in the context of mainstream media?
So right now, I think I'm choosing also who I'm working with. Right now I'm also a writer for this platform called Griot, who is an Italian platform, but it's also in English, where that is around the African diaspora. So I think I feel much more free in that sense, because I can kind of pick, who I want to work with, and also I'm surrounded by people when, I'm like, okay, I have this story. What do you think about it? Do you think I can talk about it? And we discuss about it. And they're like, okay, you can write about it. There is a dialogue. There is no like trying to tell me to write something in a certain way, like it could happen, for example, I know, well, let's say if I was writing for a platform like Matches, for example, and if I had to interview whatever black designers, they would have, I think I would be limited in what I want to ask to that designer, and I would be very much edited also with the conversation. So I think to being that, let's say, freelance, it's much more harder in the sense of obviously money. But you also feel more free to collaborate with the people you want to. Obviously, when you have laid out a financial basis for you to be, quite comfortable to do so. But I would say that with major media, when they talk about black people, or they want you to talk about it, there is always a time, and I don't know why there should be a time to talk about blackness. There shouldn't be any time. It's, we are there 365 days, all the time.
1 month doesn't cut it, really.
Exactly. So I'm always like, why do you limit? And there is also, working in fashion, you always hear those same names. I don't have any issues with, Grace Wells-Bonner, love her work, but who is her? Then you have another one, maybe, there's Bianca Saunders. Then there is this new one. There's Tebe Magugu, for example. You will hear these three names, going around, and then
it's like what I said. It's like one creative at a time, rather than allowing everyone to be able to share their work.
Exactly.
Things like people that are accepted, and then they're just moved around rather than
exactly
being authentic.
And it's as if when the George Floyd assassination happened. So it was as if people suddenly woke up about it.
And then we became yellow pages for telling everyone how to not be racist.
Yeah. So that's also quite funny how in, let's say, the creative space, the corporate, I would say creative corporates react to this, is that you need to make an announcement that was so shocking, that what you saw, that you invite people to donate to the Black Lives Matter movement in the US. I'm like, don't you have people in the UK that die also? That was this nonsense. And trying to find creatives outside of the country, that black creatives outside of the country, find it quite problematic, really.
It's this whole kind of, like I was saying earlier, about this kind of creating distance. Like, this is a problem that is in America, whereas essentially it is a problem in it's a problem over the entire globe, because
exactly
racism and colorism and all of these different issues that have arisen because of colonialism are still very much in place within the foundations of our society. And unless we were to radically turn it upside down, it's not going away at all. But it's just only now certain groups of people are waking up to it, because essentially if you never had to experience it personally yourself, it wasn't your problem.
Exactly.
But even then, this concept of people slowly now waking up to it, a lot of it is just acting. A lot of people are now pretending to wake up to it just so that they can be seen as socially acceptable. But the truth of the matter is, a couple months down the line, they're making things such as diversity boards and all of these things to tick boxes as if to say they've done something. But then you look in between the cracks and things are still the same. Like, the head offices are still predominantly white. Even their models, they may choose a mixed race girl, but they're ticking the box there. But even then, it's not. That's colorism. It goes straight back to it. It's all very temporary, and it's like performance. It's performance activism.
Yeah, it's very performative, but it's actually interesting because I do it a lot because I'm a photographer and a filmmaker, and I am kind of always looking at what people are doing and what's going on, but. Sometimes, I'll go through photographers' Instagram and I'll notice that only in the last year or so, they suddenly have a book full of all black and mixed race models. And then you go back a little bit further and all they've got is white models prior. It's because it's now because diversity is seen as trendy suddenly, but you didn't give two shits prior to in order to want to be diverse and like
Diversity is it's become the trend.
I'm-
But
I-
even then, the trends, they die out. And this is something that we see when Black Lives Matter was happening. All of a sudden, everyone was talking about it. Everyone was trying to make sure that everyone was exclusive of everyone and whatnot. But then once the protests weren't happening every weekend, slowly it no longer became a mainstream media. It wasn't forced to be the attention.
But okay, so coming from a different background, at least here you have a type of conversation. When I look back to Italy in the fashion system, I'm like, I want to die, seriously. So you have that designer called Stella Jean, and she's Italo-Haitian. She's the only black designer of the Camera della Moda, so the Italian Fashion Council. She's the only one. And so she wrote that letter to the president of the Italian Fashion Council, to tell him, okay, we need to be helping the black creative because we have creatives in the black creatives in the country, and we should help. Can you believe that no media in Italy covered her story?
I can believe that. It's happened all the time.
But it was covered in the New York Times. She was on Business of Fashion, so I think as for what I know with the fashion industry, I believe that this conversation, even though they can be fake or not, truthful, they're still kind of happening. Whereas if you look at even in France, surely in France, they are not happening. I'm sure that they didn't put any diversity, whatever, committee in any fashion company, because talking about systemic racism is an issue, and you would even be surprised about the comments black employees can hear in the office space in France. So I really think I really see the difference when I talk to my friends working in fashion in Italy, and they explain me what is the climate. As opposed to here, I'm like, here looks like paradise compared to what they're living. And then when I speak to my friends in France who are working in fashion, same issue. They're like, at least you kind of have a beginning of conversation, whereas we just don't.
But obviously I don't have the same experiences of being able to compare to other European countries, but I'm kind of like so aware that it's almost like it's for the sake of it we're creating these positions. There are all these diversity roles that are being created, but there's so many people that I know that I've talked to who are in these positions, but when they're in these positions, they are so limited to what actual power they have. So you've got a face there within your company that is actually essentially just making you look good and to saying you're diverse. But I think it's almost like we're in a situation where we're like black faces but not black voices. I think this is where we're at.
100%. That's always been the case, though, in my opinion. I think, don't get me wrong, it's positive that these diversity boards are now put in place. But it's even, for instance, using the most mainstream thing that we can see, when we had Edward become the editor of Vogue, everyone was clapping and everyone was super excited that there was finally a black face within fashion, and a British fashion editor at that. But then there's only so much control and there's only so much he can actually do to make there be true change within the fashion industry, because even if you now, don't get me wrong, yes, there's more black models on the covers and there may be more black photographers, but the ratio, you can't even compare, but then you can't put all of that responsibility on one person. No. The weight of in order to break it all down, and you have to literally start all over again, because the years that have gone before him becoming the editor, one person can't change all of that alone. And again, the people who are above him are the ones who say yes. The editor, yes, you have a powerful place, but you have the whole entire Condé Nast. Like, you can't fight that. And I think it's more so about recognizing that it's great if we have people who are in these positions, but we can't also expect them to eradicate everything that's happened prior to them being there.
But I think it's also about levels. It's that you need to have diversity on every single level, from the top all the way down, and that means to be people in the middle ground. Because I think, like with Edward, it's kind of similar to Obama. Do you know what I mean? It's like you can, just because you put somebody in the top position, there are so many other things that you're navigating that there is only so much physical change you can make despite becoming the face of it, or even the voice. But it's like, how much is it your voice that's allowed to come through?
But yet again, that's why when we're talking about, me not working anymore in an organization, I do think I still find positive. For example, you have this kind of event here, and I see a lot of independent people doing things. I think it's really hard because you need the money to fund everything. You need support too, obviously. But I mean, it's still happening because I don't really believe in organizations that have already been built for years and years. Especially in fashion, it won't change unless you, I think it was a little bit what Othello was telling before, not waiting to have that seat at the table, but basically either making your own table, than, just waiting for them to give you a seat. But again, from my point of view, I always feel like that's why I came here, because in London, because I felt like I couldn't have this opportunity in France, for example, because again, it is a very rigid system. Even within fashion, you need to do a certain type of school. I don't have a background in fashion, so. Would have been very difficult to be able to work in fashion or even do some journalism or something. So I think that at least we have what I see positive is that at least you can have the spaces, you can create the spaces, and you won't be blocked to do that. If I was trying to do that back home, only with black people, they would say it's what they call it, communitarism, or I don't know how you say that.
I don't know, but it's probably due to reverse racism.
No, it's just like you just want to stay with your community. You don't want to open up to the to the concept of France.
Yeah.
So I know there are a lot of problems here, but I still see it is more positive because you still have the spaces and you can still have some dialogues. Whereas in other spaces, it is not possible. It's very difficult to have this kind of conversation, be it with black people or white people, because when you are in a system where you are used to be told not to talk about who you are, you tend to behave that way. And once someone is doing it, you just feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's what my issue with the podcast, when I was trying to ask a lot of French.
Because you interviewed a lot of musicians and artists for the podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, and when I tried to ask some people to tell me about their experience, they wouldn't let me to. They wouldn't want to be on the podcast. They would I would like to talk to you in private, for sure, give you some input, but...
When you then tried, did you ask them as to why they didn't feel comfortable, or you just left it there?
Some people, they will explain you that they don't want, to go deeper into that question because it's still a burning issue for them. And they are not, they didn't, how can I say that, resolve the issue with that. Others, I think it's, they know they're black, but they are not accepting being, I don't know how to say, being black. So it was quite interesting when I was trying to find people.
But I think it's also a case of when certain people have reached a certain position, they're almost nervous to talk too deeply about the realities as to what they face in case they lose that position.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's more because I forgot to mention, so I have a podcast in Italian that's called Black Coffee, and this is where I interviewed these artists. And you realize that they are very careful about what they are saying, because if not, they might lose that occasion, because they are so few. Like Black Italians are maybe less than 1% of the population in Italy. They are so few, and once they've reached a certain level, like you were saying, they are so afraid to lose that position that either they decide not to talk, either they decide to talk bad about another Black person, you know? So I'd say it's a very difficult, thing to do, to bring people to speak about themselves or what they do in arts, you know, when it comes to their Blackness each time. It's like I always have to, yeah.
Yeah, because it's hard, because sometimes speaking out could mean that you're losing job opportunities, and that's the thing. I think you can often be in this kind of middle ground of wanting to talk about things that you think are important, but then also you have to be conscious of your own livelihoods and still being able to move through life.
Yeah, and the John Boyega thing. Remember the Black Lives Matter protest speeches when John Boyega said he doesn't care if he doesn't get any opportunities after that? And it was such an emotional speech, it went viral, but even then he was still given opportunities. But even him in his position, the fear in his voice of him recognizing just simply by him speaking about not being treated equal to somebody else simply because of the color of his skin. It was a painful speech to watch, but it's a speech that so many people, even people who aren't in his position as an actor, even teachers, because even my mother, she was one Black teacher in a predominantly private school, and all of the teachers were white, but even then, you feel like you have an element of responsibility, but then you're also a person and you should feel entitled to be able to speak your truth. But again, within the institutions, once you're in there, you're so scared to lose that position. It's something that it trickles down. It's not just people who are in high positions, it's having a position at all.
But that reveals also that there is a lot of trauma, because if you cannot, express yourself freely about what you are and what you think should be done to not, be in a situation of racism every day, it's a situation of trauma. And that's what I've realized when I was talking to people. And I have that's not that to say that the conversations that are recorded are not interesting, but the very interesting conversations are the ones off, because this is where people are really telling you the real trauma, and that condition of being Black in Europe as an artist, as any Black person, is a condition of trauma.
It kind of makes me think of there's the conversation between James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni, when James Baldwin is talking about the reality of being a Black man, and that because through your working day and your working life, you have to adhere and you have to silence yourself in order to be able to make an income and to support your family, and then how in which that impacts your home life and how you are going home to your family. And because you can't be vocal in your work environment, you are taking that out on somebody else. So I think there's the huge impact on your mental health and also people around you, because if these frustrations are not being able to be vocalized somewhere, it is going to have negative impacts elsewhere in your life.
Yeah, I agree, but that's exactly why I did my Instagram, because I was like, feel so frustrated not to, because I was feeling like kind of the only one to have that kind of type of situation I was in with my family, because I didn't, the people who I knew had an interracial family were all mixed race, so it's a different experience, than me, who is Black and having that setup, So when I started this project, I think I felt really kind of liberated, of something I wanted to say for so long, and yes, it was about me, but it was also like, hey, is there anyone like me? Can we talk together about it? Because I really need, to
I think that's what it's about. Again, with Black Exchange, it's about community, because as much as you may have these inner frustrations or feelings, there definitely is always someone out there who's feeling the same,
Yeah.
And I think even though we talk about the frustrations of social media, I think it has now created that community that you couldn't have before. For me, I spent most of my childhood living in Kent in a predominantly white area, whereas now you can curate the artists and the people you see and the information you want to receive based on what you choose to follow on social media, which in a way you can almost kind of counteract the mainstream media in that way. Because I remember I was having this conversation with somebody and I was saying well, all I'm aware of is mainly predominantly black artists, black models, black photographers, because that is what I'm choosing to look at. So in a way, you can kind of create what you need to see, because I think there's this idea of obviously you can achieve despite, but it is very helpful to be able to see examples of success already, to be well, someone else has done it, so it gives you the idea there is a possibility for you to also do it.
Yeah, that's why. Okay, so I have a podcast, but if you look at my Instagram page, there's also these portraits of Black Europeans. And for example, I took, who can I give as an example? You have the story of one Black Italian who could have been the first Black boxing Europe boxing champion, but it wasn't, because it was during fascism, and so they just erased his bout with the other boxer, so people forgot about him, but he has an extraordinary life. It's called Leone Iacovacci, or there is the story of this Afro-German called Hans Massaquoi. He was the grandchild of the first ever ambassador, Black African ambassador in Europe. And he was originally from Liberia. These kind of stories, I think it is important to know them, that these people are, were there, and to not only look at kind of, how can I say, success in the people of now, but just to look at the past too, because it is quite important to see how these people, they weren't living in the society we are living today, succeeded, because this guy, Hans Massaquoi, so yes, his grandfather was the first African ambassador, in Europe, but he was also a mixed race child in Nazi Germany, and when the war started, his grandfather had to go back to Liberia, and then he just lived there with his mom. So he lived, in this Nazi Germany. Being the only person, Black person, where he lived. So he had an extremely difficult life, and then you hear that years later he had become one of the most famous editor at Jet and Ebony magazine, So that's the kind of story I think we need to know, and that we don't hear enough about.
It's true, especially with the mainstream media, whenever it's a Black successful artist, it's usually only predominantly music that the media likes to always portray, as if there's one category that
Yes.
Black people can be a part of when it comes to the arts. It's very few and fair that they show, Black politicians or Black judges, or there's always one narrative that we're meant to fit. And I think things like this in regards to history is there. It's just you have to literally look for it, but then share it amongst the community.
But then also I think in some ways it's like they want us to know just enough history to keep us happy. It's like you can have Martin Luther King, you can have, do you know what I mean? It's like you can have these tidbits, but then also I feel like a lot of the kind of the stories and the historical figures that are still acknowledged and a part of mainstream history.
Afro-Americans.
Are
Afro-Americans.
Are Americans,
but were also people who were like end up being assassinated.
Oh, yes.
So it's like you can fight as much as you want, but like
You
know
don't
this
succeed.
is going to be the ending story.
No, but again, that's why I said these stories of all these people in Europe that were black and that were there before us. It's really important to find them, because they have written books. The main problem, obviously, in Europe is that we don't all speak the same language. So you cannot know if you don't speak any of the language or you know someone from that place who can explain you the things. But because this is what I've tried to look, I have the chance to speak 3 languages, so that's why I'm able to do that, and when I find...
But do you do the podcasts in 3 languages, or is it just Italian and French?
No. The one podcast is in English, and the other one is in Italian.
Okay.
But because I see the podcast very attached to my Instagram page, that if you go through my Instagram page, I think you spend a lot of time.
It's a lot of posts.
On it, because it's also like you need to love to read, because I'm a writer after all, so it's what I do. But it's a lot of research in different languages. It's a lot of where can I find black people in the past. So when I started my research, to place these black Europeans, I was like, okay, where usually do you find black people? I say in the army. So I started looking, at army registry, black people. This is where I found some interesting people in there. Then when I went to look at Germany, the case of Germany, I was like, oh, that's funny that the black people they are all mixed race, because you have a whole series of mixed race people in Germany during World War II, and they were most of them were abandoned, and where you find them in circus playing Africans. So there is this.
Even in Germany now, we were both speaking. When I was in Berlin, I counted like 8 black people. There's not even many black people in Germany today.
I think, again, that's also the thing when I was in Munich, I said I didn't see any black people, probably because I wasn't in the right circle of people, I think you probably have a community of Afro-Germans that is really trying to get heard. They are doing things, but because maybe if you don't speak the language or you don't know the right people, you won't find them that easily. Me being a Cameroonian, for example, I know because you have a lot of Cameroonians, because Cameroon used to be a German colony first. So you have a lot of Cameroonians there. So when I go, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to find a Cameroonian community, and then I'll be introduced to other communities, right? But when I was in Munich, I think also because Munich it was the city where Nazism was born, basically. So there is a strong heritage here that makes it a very white city, as opposed to Berlin, for example.
But I wanted to ask you, in terms of your different experience in the different places and through your podcast, the commonalities between the black experiences within different European countries, and kind of, I think it's really important in that we find kind of a way in which we can kind of create community across the diaspora, because we're all struggling within the results of colonialism and various identity issues in different places, and how can we come together in terms of moving forwards as a unity. That's obviously not a question in terms of like what is the answer.
So I think the thing with the podcast, I think that as much as I had people who found it difficult to chat, with me, there were also other people that were really happy to talk, and I think that this happy to talk, it means a lot, that we have a lot in common, and that even if you have different countries with different history of colonialism, the stories are sometimes similar. You can find commonalities there, and I think from the people I interviewed, they all that they want to know about other Black people in other countries, not just in the countries, you know? So I think that's why I think there need to be some kind of platforms that, you know.
I think it's just about like making spaces, making safe spaces for people to have conversations, and then thankfully because of social media and because of technology, we can actually access and share it with one another. But I think the foundations basically always comes to safe spaces and community. And I think we need to learn as a community to really share the knowledge that we have, unlearn things and relearn the truth, and then share it with everyone, really.
Yeah.
But on that note, we need to wrap up because of Auntie Corona and our 10 p.m. curfew. So thank you all. Hopefully this will be great for the recording live, and thank you all for coming.
And yeah, so this is probably going to be our last live event for a while, but we'll probably go back to our classic Instagram lives, because, you know, these are important conversations and we can't let, you know, pandemics stop these from happening.
Definitely not.
But
So,
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.